us, but lived right alongside us in East Asia up until about 12,000 to 20,000 years ago. And then this Homo neanderthalensis, we know, existed in Europe and Western Asia. The most recent described site has a preliminary date of 10,000 years ago. That's a third younger than any previously described site. 10,000 years. Denisova, Homo denisova, has been described as the sister group to Neanderthals and humans, just outside of them. This was quite intriguing because despite the fact that the DNA is so similar to us, they have teeth, the teeth that were associated with the finger bones from which the DNA was extracted, are as large as some of these Australopithecines. So we have a different combination of adaptation, which would be quite interesting. So the Russians were very intrigued with this discovery as a possible explanation for the Almasti. This was a new specimen, group of specimens that was found in southern China that had enough distinctions that the authors were suggesting it was a separate genetic population, and so on. And then a recent development, for a long time, teeth, it was thought that teeth of Homo erectus were being found alongside Gigantopithecus, persisting well into the Pleistocene. You know, it was thought that Gigantopithecus was one of the only apes, other than the species of extant ape, that had persisted into the Pleistocene. Well, now they've been reallocated to Lufangpithecus, a gorilla-sized ape, with some really remarkable similarities to Homo, but contemporaneous with Gigantopithecus, and that's just going to keep on expanding. So this gets. So if you had a time machine, you went back just say 20,000 years, and you stepped out, you had a chance of bumping into any of a half a dozen plus different varieties of hominid. Now, Nova did a series recently called Becoming Human, and they explored this notion of the contemporaneity of many different species, and really built upon that theme as they discussed it. But then they came to the last episode, which was called The Last Hominid Standing, and they proposed this not rhetorical, but this question: why is it that we're the only remaining hominid on the planet? What is it about us? And then they tried to make some explanation about our intelligence, our technology and culture, our expanding populations. Those same arguments were made 30 years ago when it was argued that Homo erectus was the only hominid species, and then all of a sudden robust Australopithecines were found right alongside them, as well as several other species of Homo, more primitive Homo, from which Homo erectus had arisen. And that argument was dropped again. And so I was amazed to see it transported forward. Why would now be an exception to the rule that's prevailed for the past 7 million years or more? Well, maybe it's not the exception. And in fact, the evidence suggests that it's not. Evidence that there are other relic hominoids and hominids. The Almasti, maybe a relic Neanderthal or Denisova. The orang pendek, maybe a relic hobbit, Homo floresiensis. Sasquatch, maybe a relic Gigantopithecus or robust Australopithecine, and so on. Recently, the New Scientist had a cover story entitled "The 10 Biggest Questions in Human Evolution," and the editors compiled that list, what they thought were the most pressing issues of note, and number 9 was, are other hominins alive today? That was a huge admission, a huge event, for me anyway, that was considered. Now the article, unfortunately, and I reviewed the article in the Relic Hominoid Inquiry, you can look at it, was a little bit disappointing. Even though they acknowledged it, they still couldn't quite embrace it. And so lots of excuses and lots of quibbling and waffling, which I kind of took them to task for. They interviewed me for this article, but didn't do the interview justice. So what is it? Well, even if the DNA analysis is successful, we won't really know that much more. We'll be able to place it in a phylogeny relative to other species. But all the other evidence we have is anecdotal reports. So how's that going to be addressed? Back in about 1998, William Barnes was a gold dredger in Northern California. One evening he was getting ready to retire. He was in his tent, had it zipped up, didn't have a rain fly on, there was just a screen on the top. And suddenly he, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a tall, dark figure. It was still enough light, he could see it, and the major outcrop there was granitic, so it was very light colored. And this dark figure comes marching down out of the woods into his camp, inspecting his operation. And it came right over to his tent and peered down into the tent at him. And he was just kind of watching, frozen, and then it went off, and off it went. Well, it was strange. He said he sat there for about 40 minutes, just kind of in a stupor. And he said, then this calm feeling just came over me. He laid down. He said, I can't understand why. He said, I lay down and went to sleep. Slept really soundly. But the next day he was, how am I going to investigate this? Why hasn't anyone got a picture, a definitive picture of, or the film, photograph of the Sasquatch? So he did lots of research, talked to lots of engineers and aviators and so forth, and he decided that the best bet was from the air, to use aerial wildlife survey techniques. He finally got in touch with a fellow who shared some of his enthusiasm, Stephen Barclay of RATS Inc., which stands for Remote Aerial Tripod Specialists, up in central Alberta, Canada. And Stephen proposed a very interesting, somewhat novel design, catamaran design with dual air ships, or dual air cells, helium-filled air cells, which provides tremendous stability to this platform, which will support, in this case, a 45-foot cell. It will support a platform that, in addition to the motor, which is like a Harrier jump jet, it can direct a stream of air, so it can pause, it can hover, it can go up, it can go down, left, right, back, forward. It's quite maneuverable. It can support 75 pounds of payload. And that's going to consist of very high-end thermal imaging cameras and high-definition videography, all wireless broadcast to a command center in a trailer, from which that'll be monitored from a distance of up to about 12 miles. It can be programmed to fly a grid pattern. If contact is interrupted for any reason, it automatically has a homing pigeon device, and it comes right back to its original coordinates and hovers until it can be retrieved. But the idea of using the thermal image to look for a target. Now, these are tried and true techniques. They just haven't been employed with an airship. So here's a video image across in Alaska, looking, and you can see the short, stunted scrub, and you really can't see much in there. But with the thermal image, boom, there are 4 moose bedded down. Now, the challenge we have, though, is the cover. Here you can see the deer emerging from the forest, but no deer within the forest, because even the state-of-the-art equipment can't penetrate through this heat-emitting canopy. And so, but we can look down between, so you can see down here. And that's the advantage of the airship. Instead of having it on a helicopter, which is expensive, noisy, and dangerous to fly at night, or on a fixed-wing aircraft that has just an instantaneous view vertically, otherwise the view looking forward is oblique down through overlapping tree crowns, you're able to look right straight down. Coincidentally, when we first announced this, and I won't go into all details, I'm out of time here, but when we first announced this project, there was actually a conference on grade 8 conservation and a symposium, an entire symposium devoted to the recent use of unmanned drones to survey for grade 8. So all these little blemishes, these little brown spots, are nests, tree nests made by orangutans. So they fly over and photograph these, and by counting the nests, they can get an idea, and over a period of time, they can get an idea of populations. There's a growing literature on the use of drones in this kind of conservation work and using these types of aerial sampling surveys in identifying and studying species. So I really think that that's the next step. That's where this search is going to go for us to make advances. Well, I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop there, and thank you for your attention. I think after lots of questions.
I don't know if you enjoyed that as much as I did, but he is very good. We have We allowed an hour and a half for lunch. We have a lot of restaurants. We have a listing back here for restaurants both downtown and out on Hamburger Hill. The panel people that are going to be talking to us or presenting at 1 o'clock, please be back at least 1:45. So have at it, and we'll see you before 1 or at 1, okay? Thanks.